On a community post about a month ago, I asked you all for some help on a video, specifically a video where I could react to your hot takes about Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. I got almost 200 comments, which is absolutely amazing, so thank you for that, but unfortunately what that means is that's way too many to go through in a single video. So here's how things are gonna work. I saved all the comments that I thought were interesting or that I could provide some interesting takes on, and I randomly selected some of them to go through here. Now if you left a comment like Cat Wario, who said, Mario Kart Stadium is the best track in the game, there's not a lot I can do with that. And also, it's all love, Cat Wario. Please don't at me in the speedrunning Discord. If, on the other hand, you left a comment that said, Ice Ice Outpost is a top 10 track in the game, it requires skill to drive but also has an element of risk to it as you may get bumped off, I can say something like, yes, I agree. I think Ice Ice Outpost is one of the more underrated tracks in the game, specifically because it's one of only a handful of tracks that features alternate path shortcuts that are intended by the developers and actually requires skill to execute properly instead of just using a speed item to cut through like so many of the other shortcuts in the game. There's your first take. The next bunch of comments I got were all in relation to the DLC tracks. For example, Jay Meowstick, who says that the DLC gets too much hate. Is it perfect? No, but for doubling the track count and 6 new characters, all for the relatively low price of $25, now that's value. Now, despite what some of you might think, I actually do agree with this. I know that I whine a lot about the city tracks and how complicated they are, but at the end of the day, I think that for me, the DLC has always been something where I've said, yes, it's fairly underwhelming, and the graphical quality, especially on tracks like Rock Mountain and Toad Circuit, really does clash with the art style of the original. However, like Jay Meowstick said, we have a bunch of extra tracks. We got 48 additional tracks, we got a bunch of characters, and as much time as I've spent on the game since downloading the DLC, it's more than earned its $25. Next up is Rumpelstiltskin, who wrote a literal essay on why they dislike the tour tracks so much, speaking of not liking the city tracks. It's a really long comment, I'm gonna leave it up for you to read on screen right now, but they basically break it down into 3 points. The first point is something I hadn't really considered, but I do think makes quite a bit of sense, which is that, you know, the tour tracks were designed around Tour's mechanics and Tour's gameplay first, which, you know, makes sense, obviously, right? They're Tour tracks. But in Tour, you're forced to stay on the main path, right? So if you ever are about to go into the off-road and you don't have a speed item, the game will push you back onto the main path. And their first point is that this is the reason why so many of the tour tracks in 8 Deluxe have these paths that look like they were designed by my kids when they were first learning how to color in the lines. This is especially apparent to me on tracks like Berlin Byways, where even though they do have these gigantic red arrows that are showing you exactly where you need to go, something about it just doesn't click right away, and it's not really clear to me why, but I have that problem on a lot of the tour tracks, the city tracks to be specific. The second topic is that bringing the tour tracks into 8 Deluxe was just a lazy way to bring already created content to a different game, and I'm not going to expand on that too much because I've already got an entire video on it that you can watch if you want to just click right up here. The third point is more of a personal preference about not liking the city tracks, and honestly I kind of have to disagree here. I think with the exception of maybe New York Minute and Paris Promenade, I do actually find basically every other city track to be at least somewhat enjoyable to drive on. Maybe toss Berlin Byways in there as well. Next up, we have Italic177, who said that the DLC music is better than the base game music, and it's not even close. I'll have to do a deeper dive in this to actually figure out like an average ranking of the songs between the base game and the DLC, but I'm honestly kind of inclined to agree here. Aside from London Loop, I feel like most of the other city tracks in the game, the music is just amazing. And even the newly designed courses like Ninja Hideaway and let's take a listen to Sky High Sunday actually really quick. That bass line is just, you know, you hear music like that and you think to yourself, I just know that the musicians had an absolute blast putting these songs together. So yeah, the base game does have some bangers, but I think the DLC might actually have the better set of songs. Now here's kind of a weird take regarding the music. Finn44099 says that 3DS Rainbow Road's song in 8 Deluxe is, and I quote, far inferior to the original. Let's take a listen really quick. Now, is it just me? These kind of sound the same, or at least that they're very obviously going for the same vibe. Let me know in the comments if you think that I'm being crazy here, because I just don't hear it. Ethan Lars says that Paris Promenade is their favorite city course, and while the graphics may not be at the base game level, what a way it was to start the booster course pass. Now I'm going to say something a little bit surprising here, which is that I think I kind of agree with this. Paris Promenade, like I just said, is not my favorite city course by far, but the first time that I went through the backwards section, it blew my mind, and I was like, wow, I cannot believe they actually have a course like this in 8 Deluxe. I think that Wave 1 is kind of like that for me in general, where I don't think I'd rank a lot of the courses as being above average, at least as far as the DLC itself is concerned, but I think Wave 1 really was a fantastic start to the Booster Course Pass, and it really did get me hyped for the future installments of the Booster Course Pass. Uchu Seijin has an interesting take, which is that they think the lower quality of the DLC tracks actually fits the vibe of Mario Kart better than the base game. They've got a funny quote here that says that the relative realism and big band jazz music makes the base tracks feel like they're going for a fun weekend dinner, only to learn that Pizza Joe's is actually a black tie restaurant. Now, I understand where they're coming from here, but I still have to disagree. My problem has never really been with the graphical quality itself. It's more about how the two styles conflict so much. Like if you look at Donut Plains 3 and then Mario Circuit 3, both of these are originally from the Super Nintendo, but it's like night and day how these courses look, and I find it kind of hard to believe that with enough love and care they couldn't have put something similar together for Mario Circuit 3. And even within the same wave you can see major differences in quality. For example, if you take a look at Riverside Park from Wave 4, it's like, oh my god, they actually put textures on the rocks here. But then you go to DK Summit and it's like, never mind, this course, like everything else about it, just looks like shit. The next two comments are pretty funny. The first one says that Waluigi Stadium is the most overrated track in the entire game, and the next is that Waluigi Pinball is one of the most overrated tracks in Mario Kart history. Like, damn, that escalated quickly. I don't have a lot to say here other than, why are you guys hating on all the Waluigi tracks, man? I'm just kidding. Waluigi Pinball sucks. Yeah, I said it. The next one is from Grey Owl, who said that the invincibility stat was never needed in this game and Nintendo realized it too late. So for those of you who don't know the history here, what happened was that starting in Wave 3, Nintendo went on a mission to kill the Waluigi Wiggler meta. Their first attempt at this was by introducing an invincibility stat. After you get hit by items, there's a set amount of time that has to elapse before you're able to get hit again. And they basically made it so that Waluigi Wiggler had the least amount of iframes after getting hit. Unfortunately, what they didn't realize is that invincibility is a totally worthless stat, and they went in Wave 4 and just upended the entire meta to get rid of Waluigi Wiggler. This leads me nicely into a comment from Mario Kart God Technical JL. Probably not a hot take, but still want to hear your thoughts on it. The Wave 5 balance patch is what the Wave 4 balance patch should have been. It builds around the Yoshi, Luigi, Teddy meta instead of trying to replace it completely like they did with Waluigi Wiggler and Waluigi Bitty Buggy. Now, in one sense, I kind of agree with Technical here. I think it's more important to bring underutilized builds up to par in minute steps, as opposed to making gigantic updates that erase literally every single world record in the game. I shouldn't have to explain why that's the case, but if you need the full breakdown, I've got another video, again, right up here that you can click on if you want to check that out. Now, where I disagree is that I don't think it was actually possible to just make small changes to bring other builds up to par without actually completely upending the meta. I think that Waluigi Wiggler, people were just going to use it until it was no longer the best, right? And so you had to make it not the best in order to actually build around a new meta. The thing is, though, that I just wish that if these types of major changes were going to happen, that it didn't take 6 years after the release of the base game for Nintendo to actually implement, because it was really a huge kick in the nuts to the time trial and the speedrunning communities that I call home in this game. You know, I don't want to go down this road too much right now, but I personally know of multiple speedrunners and time trialers who basically stopped playing the game, specifically citing the Wave 4 balance patch and saying, you know, I just don't want to play until I know that Nintendo's done screwing around with the stats. So yeah, invincibility sucks, and I hope that Nintendo only does minor tweaks going forward. So that's it. Now we're on to the mostly just random hot takes. Nivils85 says, we need more tracks where water speed is relevant. Now it's useless as water sections are very short and a lot of them are anti-grav. So here's something you all might not have been aware of. There are 4 speed statistics in this game. There's ground speed, water speed, anti-grav speed, and air speed. And only one of these can be active at any given time. So if you're on anti-grav, your ground speed is completely negated and you're just using anti-grav speed. The thing is that there are some sections in the game, like on Water Park, where there's anti-grav and water at the same time, and in those cases, anti-grav speed actually takes priority over water speed. Anyways, not important. I'm gonna go ahead and disagree with this take here because water physics in this game are damned awful, so the less of it we see, the better in my opinion. Cheddar361 says that bagging is slowly ruining the game, and on a related note, 114max5 says that Mario Kart 8's item balancing system is some of the worst that they've ever seen. First of all, disagreeing here that bagging is slowly ruining the game. I think bagging ruined the game a long time ago. Just kidding. But there is a lot to unpack here. So for the 10-second summary of how the item system works, it's based on both your position and how far away you are from first place. So a lot of the time what you'll see people do after getting wrecked is they will purposely hang back in the race to pull powerful items like lightnings and bullet bills. This is what's known as bagging, and a lot of people see this as a kind of cheap or unfair way to win. I'm fine with bagging as a strategy for coming back if you happen to get hit by a bit of bad luck during a race, but when the racing game is actively discourage you from racing, it gets a little bit annoying, let's be real. Starwolf002 says, online play is a terrible experience. Moving from last to first to last, hoping to get lucky and draw a good item, only to have a ghost steal it at exactly the wrong time. And like the reply to this comment says, that's called Mario Kart. Unnamed Toaster says, I think the coin item is great, not necessarily for its utility, but for game balancing. And you know, the only real disagreement I have with that is that I think the coin is actually fairly useful on courses like N64 Rainbow Road, where there's not really a ton of coins you can actually get on the track. Look, I know that getting coins in first place sucks, and maybe they could tune it down a little bit, especially with how common red shells are in second place, but I think removing the coin altogether would just be a terrible idea if you actually want a balanced game. Loyal viewer and Discord member Uberlord wrote a huge wall of text that I'm going to leave on screen here, but here's the gist. A lot of the things that the casual player base complained about, for example the Waluigi Wiggler meta, weren't actually that big of a problem, and there was really no reason to be upset about any of it other than because someone else is playing the game in a way that you don't like. Giving grief to the people for playing the game in a way that you don't like is dumb. My take? Overall, I kind of agree. I already gave my thoughts on the balance patch as a whole, but one thing I didn't mention was that the reason these changes were implemented in the first place was due to people on Reddit whining about going into lobbies and only seeing Waluigi Wigglers online, and calling the build an eyesore and telling people that it ruined the game for them and all this kind of really ridiculous hyperbolic nonsense. These are people who pretty much had no skin in the game as far as playing competitively, whether it be in actual competitive lobbies or time trialing or speedrunning or what have you. And in that sense, it's kind of unfortunate because, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of the people that do play the game in a more kind of competitive sense lost a lot of the motivation to really keep grinding the game out as much as they were before. Now, that's not to say that we should only consider the competitive players, but I think that the amount of utility that people got out of not seeing Waluigi Wigglers online anymore was vastly outweighed by the negative impacts to the time trialing and speedrunning scenes that this balance change actually brought to the game. Continuing along the trend of massive walls of text, Blue Batstar has a huge bone to pick with Yoshi Valley, calling it one of the worst tracks in the entire game. The main problem as they see it is that the multiple paths ruin the track for two reasons. One, because it breaks the pathing of blue shells and bullets, and two, because even if everyone did go different routes, it would mean that you don't interact with other racers until more than halfway through the track. So this is probably the only take that I really have a hard disagree with. I think that the multiple paths breaking blue shells and bullets is actually great. Rather than just mindlessly toss away your blue shells and bullets, it actually forces you to think a little bit to make sure you're using your items in a good position, and I think that's a good thing. And the not interacting with other racers bit is something I guess I can kind of get behind in theory, but as far as playing online, it's kind of a moot point because everybody takes the bridge or the path right next to it, so you never really have to worry about not interacting with anybody in a race. Coming up on the end of the video, Freezing Fire left what has to be my favorite comment of the bunch and just said, pace locks don't exist, people just need to get better at the game. Okay, so first things first, what is pace lock? On Yoshi's Island, there's that question mark box that I used to love to complain about. It moves back and forth in this wavy pattern, and on 150cc, every time it's at its peak, you can't hit it. So what happens is you can run into a situation in time trials where if you go fast enough, you won't be able to hit it because you'll be there on a bad cycle. Ironically, this can also happen if you're playing too fast, so there are circumstances where it can actually be faster to purposely slow down to make sure you can hit the box. In this way, the question mark box locks your pace, so pace lock. This kind of thing exists on pretty much any track that has cycle-based obstacles, for example the waves on Ribbon Road or the little ramps on TikTok Clock. But what's funny about this comment is that in a technical sense, I kind of agree with it. Pretty much every pace lock that exists in this game is theoretically breakable, at least if the group that I talked to on Discord is to be believed. So yeah, pace lock doesn't actually exist. It's just a skill issue. And for the final comment, Mini Pekka says that stats be damned, Wiggler Wiggler is the best combo. Care to guess how I feel about this one? And that's it for this video. If there's any other hot takes that I didn't get to in this video, feel free to drop them in the comments because if this video does well, I will definitely be making more like it. So thanks for watching everyone, and I will catch you all in the next one.